I've done occupational therapy research over 30 years, and my first research was an intervention study. I did it as a PhD student. And there are some common features in all of these intervention studies, and one is that I've always combined quantitative and qualitative research. And another is that I thought I had a broad approach to when selecting outcome measures. So activity or occupation has been one of those perspectives, and well-being aspects, for example, quality of life, but also social interaction and symptoms. So these are common ones, which I will not mention them particularly when I move on, so just remember this, please. And then I have tried to have more than one perspective on outcomes. The service user, him or herself, of course, do their ratings and experience what they have perceived, but also another perspective, and most often that other perspective is the research assistant doing some type of rating or estimation or interview. Qualitative studies hasn't been the main part of my research, but I've always added that, and I recently found sort of the rationale for that expressed very eloquently by Hans Rose. But he was discussing with another researcher who sought the cause of an epidemic, and that researcher said, but we invested everything. And Hans Rosling said, no, you have not investigated everything as you used questionnaires. You have only investigated what you can imagine. You have not investigated what you can't imagine. So I think that's the main reason for having qualitative studies, that then you can get to know what you didn't imagine you needed to ask for even. So challenges and learnings. Have you heard about the lasagna effect? No. Lasagna is the name of a researcher, and he concluded that as soon as a project starts, the number of eligible participants really drops. So that's what I found, and I think many of you have found that as well, that when you plan for the study, everybody says there are loads of service users who will need this and who will want to participate. And as soon as you need to recruit, the number has really dropped. And having to rely on gatekeepers, people sort of inside the organization who will help you, can really be a nightmare. That's what I encountered several times, and what I called the dead ends when I needed to restart. And also regarding the findings, that changes over time, they may be easy to identify, but if you compare the changes with another group who has also been in some kind of treatment, the changes might not, the differences between the group might not be statistically significant. So that's why it is very important with comparison groups when you do quantitative studies on interventions. And I've already mentioned this about quality of life changes, that they might show after some time, and is therefore tricky as an outcome measure. And what I also concluded was that we need a variety of instruments addressing occupation. They weren't available at that time. And also subjective perceptions of occupation, not just performance, but satisfaction and engagement and meaningful occupations. So that's why I didn't continue with intervention studies, because I needed to stop, and I needed to consider what had I learned, what do we need to know more before I do the next intervention study. So I thought that we would need to know more about how everyday life is among people with mental health problems. What do they do? What do they need? What do they want? And I was also curious about activity or occupation in itself, and what work means compared to other occupations and other productive occupations. And I wondered about community day centers, because they can offer productive occupations, but do they make a difference, the day centers? And also, we need to develop instruments to address activity or occupation. So that's something I also spent quite a lot of time on. During these years, I was also my PhD was in psychology. So I'm also associate professor of psychology. So I did some more psychology-related research as well, into quality of life and into personality. And I also made some links between personality and occupation. So that was quite, I had real fun those years. And I also had several doctoral students who helped me do this research and who did their PhDs in these projects. But then I was ready for a new intervention study, and this was something called Redesigning Everyday Occupation, REDO. It's a 16-week program inspired by lifestyle redesign from the USC. And it was developed for people with stress-related disorder. It's often called minor mental disorders. So it was for this group. So the end goal with this program was that people would return to work. And it was a group intervention with a focus on the whole repertoire of patterns of everyday occupations. And we identified both dazzling and uplifting happenings in people's lives. And used this restoring and therapeutic mechanisms that may be found among everyday occupations. So people would change their everyday life, and they would also change perhaps who does what in the home, because the home area is full of occupations. It can be full of demands, and sometimes you can't change your work situation, but you can change your home situation. So we really looked into all the areas of everyday life, and we also looked into leisure activities, because if you have no room for leisure activities, you don't have a good balance in everyday life. What we realized here is that reorganization can really stop a project. Sometimes you need to reconsider where you will perform the project, and that's what we had to do. So we were really stopped for 3 years when we didn't do. It wasn't that we didn't do anything. It was that we sought new arenas all the time, because the social insurance offices, they reorganized at that time. So it wasn't known when we started, but it happened when we were about to start. I mean, these things happened really quickly, so they are hard to foresee. So that's why collaboration with such authorities can be really challenging. But helping an energetic contact persons, gatekeepers, they can really make a difference. So if they are helping, they can really save you. So that's what when we finally could perform the study, we had a very helping and energetic gatekeeper within the social insurance office system, who was really worth her weight in gold. And we knew that, of course, statistical power is very important, but now we felt it in our bones, because we didn't reach the number we really wanted to, so it was underpowered. And well, we got some statistically significant findings, but not on all of the measures we wanted to. And there were really trends, but they were not significant. So I was so determined that the next intervention study we will have more subjects. And the next study really developed out of the descriptive research I told you I had done. So part of that was comparing those who had work with those who had other productive activities and with those who didn't have any regular activities during the day. And I thought there would be a difference with those who had some type of regular activity, either work or other productive, and those who didn't have anything. But the difference was between those who had work and the rest, the other two groups. So that surprised me a bit, and I was thinking maybe it was too few participants. Maybe we'll find something if I make another project with more participants. So I did that, and so then we had larger groups. We had like almost 100 in each group. One had productive activities, and the other had no regular activities. But there were mainly no differences at all between the two groups. Those with productive activities, they had a larger social network, but no other differences. So then I was thinking that, okay, going to a day center, which was where these productive activities could be performed, doesn't seem to make a difference. But then couldn't we do something about the day centers to improve their abilities to support people, to make them feel more competent, make them be more satisfied with their daily occupations, and make them feel better. So that's why this intervention study was made. So again, we had difficulties in attracting a sufficiently large sample, and we should have performed a pilot feasibility here. But on the other hand, maybe this was a pilot feasibility. You can view it as a pilot feasibility. It wasn't that large. But we decided that in the next intervention study we will definitely have larger samples at any cost. Yeah. And we also came to think about how to view deviating findings from quantitative and qualitative sub-studies. And I won't give you any answer to that. Then we followed an organizational reform. So this was a naturally occurring intervention. This happened in Stockholm, the capital of Sweden, with 1 million inhabitants. And so the outline of the intervention was that they decided that they wanted to introduce a free choice reform. And this free choice had like two components. So one was procurement from other providers. Otherwise it was the municipality who organized and ran the day centers. And the other part was freedom to choose any day center, procured or run by the municipalities. So the service users could choose any day center. So it sounds very good, right? So here we couldn't randomize. I take the rationale first. There was no equivalent municipality in all Sweden. There were 7 or 8 other municipalities who had decided to introduce this free choice reform, but none of them was even close to resembling Stockholm. So it wasn't possible. So what we did to create some kind of control was that we had a double baseline before the reform was launched. So we had 2 measurement points to see if anything changed before the reform was launched. And then we had 3 other measurements following the reform, because it wasn't only the distance. Several units were involved and several research assistants performed the data collection. so I needed to be really alert. Yeah. It was also a bit sensitive to present these negative findings to the municipality workers. We organized a seminar for staff and day center staff, managers, service users, of course, and politicians were also invited, but they didn't come. But it wasn't so, I mean, those who managed the system and worked in this system and got their services in this system, it wasn't, but we could more or less confirm what they felt. So they weren't really surprised by these negative findings. And in this project, I collaborated with a social work researcher, and that was great. So it was a very good experience to work with someone who had another theoretical foundation and thought of things differently from a methodological point of view too. So that's one of the positive learnings. Now we're over to my flagship. Do you use that word? Yeah. It's also a lifestyle redesign inspired intervention. We call it balancing everyday life. So this time we really got the power, or almost the power we wanted. So endurance and good funding, then you can get enough statistical power. But we went on for years and years to collect a sufficiently large sample and included more and more units. Yes, and there are some challenges when you do projects that stretch over a long time. We had to change coordinators because of babies coming, and it can really cause a turbulence when, a project coordinator is a really important person, and when you need to change on that post, back and forth, it can cause turbulence, and so you really need to have, be careful about paperwork and doing logs and not just collect data and hope that everything is in the cupboard, but you really need to be careful. And the PI needs to be very present. This is the last picture. So this is collected challenges and learnings. I don't think I need to go through it. You have it in your handouts. So then I just show this picture. I wasn't alone in this. So quite a few people have been involved as researchers or doctoral students in the intervention studies. And this is where I was the other day, where I relax. So thank you for listening. Yeah.